I'm big reason why I'm not super down on LSU is because of who they just went up against. I still think that LSU is good enough to finish as a top 10 team at the end of the season. They're going to finish with a good record by the end of the year because they have a favorable schedule where they can win a lot of the games down the stretch. And they've got plenty of time.
LSU versus Ole Miss right now, DBs?
That's going to be a tough matchup. They're going to have to get things situated and figured out. But here is my main point, though, Blake. National championship winning teams have defining moments very early on in the season. Very, very often there are games for those teams. Last year it was Georgia beating the crap out of Oregon. That was the defining moment for them. Florida State just made a statement. They just announced themselves to the world and said, you guys were talking about Coach Prime the other day and how he just put together a transfer portal haul and made them competitive again. Look what we just did. We just put together an all-star team of all of the players in the transfer portal. That was the best transfer portal class. This team will play in the national championship, Blake. That's why I'm saying that, like LSU fans, I don't think you should obviously read into the issues, but you can only take it with so much of you have to take it with so much of a grain of salt because you just played against a top 2, top 3 team in the country. I know that there's an aspiration for LSU to be in that conversation, but that team is going to play in the national championship by the end of the season. And we talked about this a lot leading up to the game, Blake, that whoever won this game was going to gain a ton of momentum that was going to set them up for that type of a run. And Florida State is not going to have any other challenges until they play Clemson. They're not going to face a single other team that gives them as much of a challenge along the offensive and defensive line on their regular season schedule. Not even Clemson fits that discussion. Florida State is as well-rounded as any team in the country, and I would argue they are in the conversation to be more well-rounded than Michigan and Georgia. Their quarterback is poised and can make plays. They have massive jump ball threats at receiver that are unguardable, and Keon Coleman is a freaking dude, and I said that during the preseason that he is going to be the second wide receiver off the board when it's all said and done. Their offensive line is stout. They've got multiple strong, elusive running backs, and their defensive line is freaking dominant, not to mention the defensive backs they went and added. That roster, and I don't want to hear the bullshit that people are saying that that's a hot take because it's not. That team, if you watched it, is good enough to play in the national championship.
I agree. And on that point, you know what's wild about this?
What?
The teams that made the 2 biggest impacts this weekend were who, in your opinion?
It was Colorado and Florida State.
All the touchdowns made by Florida State last night, guys from the transfer portal. Colorado, all of their touchdowns were Deion recruits, okay, Dylan Edwards, or portal players. I think we got a little writing on the wall about how it might be to make a team now. Either you're going to have to recruit like Alabama or Georgia, or you're just going to have to throw shit at the wall when it comes to the portal and see what sticks. You got to win the Keon Colemans. You got to win the Braden Fisks. You got to win the Jaheim Bell recruiting portal-wise. You cannot Fincherell Cypress. You got to be able to win those battles. The truth is, Colorado had the number 1 overall portal class because of how many dudes they brought in. Travis Hunter single-handedly could win you that one. But Florida State's right there. They are right there. I do agree that I think the point that you just made was probably the best take that I think you've ever had. In this way, Florida State can attack you in so many different ways offensively. It's scary. But here's another thing, too. Let's not act like in that first half LSU wasn't popping them in the mouth offensively.
They were. That's my whole – and the other part of that, too, Mekhi Wingo was eating up the lunch of the entire interior.
Well, and Jordan Jefferson, 99. Yeah. Dude, the interior of that offensive line for Florida State is not good.
This is my whole point, though, is that who the heck are they going to face down the stretch? First of all, they're going to make the playoff. But when then they have to then face Georgia or Michigan, which is very likely. I know it's only been 1 week, but it's very likely. I don't think that either of those teams have vastly better offensive lines or defensive lines. That is the truest test that they're going to get. And I know that they had difficulty, but they're not going to get stopped by anyone. I don't think, and I know that we still have to watch Clemson in 30 minutes when that game kicks off. I'm not really that worried about Clemson going up against this team. I think Clemson's going to be explosive and they're going to be a top 10 team, but they are not on that same level as Florida State. They're going to be improved, but they do not have those athletes at receiver and running back.
I'm going to push back. Let's see what Garrett Riley does.
Look, Will Shipley's fine, and I know that they've got some bodies at receiver, but
they got more than bodies.
They don't have Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell, and Keon Coleman. Those dudes, that is the best
and
offensive weapon arsenal in college football right now.
I agree. There's not a I do think from a wide receiver perspective, I would tolerate the debate of Ohio State. Okay. I would tolerate it because with better quarterback play, I do think that Ohio State's receiving core, weapons wise, and running backs, you can't make the argument. Okay.
The guy can't get them the damn ball, though. That's the problem.
Correct. But I do agree. Keon Coleman, Joe, I have videos all over AYS of me begging and pleading. Trey Harris at Ole Miss, Louisiana dude from Lafayette. I begged and pleaded. My entire take during the offseason was LSU led the country or led the SEC in drops a year ago. They have green grass athletes. If you don't utilize them, Joe, they had 18 passes. LSU last night had 18 passes, 10 yards or less.
That's
10 yards or less. You want to hear
terrible.
something even more nuts? The passes that weren't. One went for 75 yards at the end of the game for a touchdown. That's one. Jaden had 5 other throws, 10 yards plus. You want to hear something nuts? All of them were dropped. Let me repeat what I just said. 18 passes, 10 yards or less, okay? Every other pass besides the touchdown, he had one other one. Every other pass was dropped 10 yards plus.
I have a kind of a shitty take that you're not going to like.
Hit me with it.
I don't know if this team's equipped for Jaden Daniels.
You got to take shots, Joe. So if I told you that he had 8, hold on one second.
But they don't call the offense that way though. That's the problem.
Well, they couldn't because they had 6 drops. He went 2 for 8 at 10 yards plus. Okay, 10 yards plus. He had 8 attempts. I'm okay with that. You're gonna have to do that. Joe, what if I told you that a guy went 2 for 6 on passes 10 yards and plus, and 6 of them were dropped?
I mean, that doesn't serve very well for him. He needs his receivers to make those plays.
Okay. Yeah. What happens if those passes are connected with?
Man, this is the whole thing. Then it's going to be you have more of an offensive. You have more offensive momentum.
The one with Malik Neighbors in the end zone, you were at the 5-yard line. That's not a 10-yard throw. Okay, it looks different because it's going from the far hash to the opposite side of the end zone, but he's at the 5-yard line. Like this is not my go look up PFF. This isn't my take. But when I look at that though, Joe, you take 8 shots and 6 drops. That is a massive issue. All right.
I just don't get, again, I don't want to reiterate what we talked about earlier. Just the decision making for that quarterback, the play calling to set him up to ask him to do things that he's not good at. Like, you guys can run the ball really, really well. You've got a good stable of running backs, but you didn't use them. Here's my last take on this before we transition, and I this is definitely going to piss you off. It's a down year for SEC. It's a down year for SEC teams. Plain and simple.
I think it's way too early to tell that.
I was just about to say I'm overreacting a little bit. I am admitting that I'm overreacting a little bit, but in all of the non-conference primetime premier matchups where it was painted out to be that these SEC teams were going to start off the season strong, not only did a bunch of them lose, they didn't lose in the best of fashions. And I'm pointing at the fact that South Carolina looked really sloppy. They gave up 9 sacks. Florida looked completely inept offensively, and they couldn't move the ball.
In the SEC, though.
I don't know.
In the SEC.
if Alabama
right now, Vandy on the road is a 6.5 point dog. On the road.
Alabama needs to regain the momentum for the conference because right now things are not looking very good. The Pac-12, did you know the Pac-12 is undefeated right now in all their non-conference matchups?